Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Maxor again with the new microphone and the new project that I'm going to show off to you. If you're familiar with my other ones, you will notice that this is approximately the same with a few more parts just because I like to reduce lag. If you didn't know, in Adobe Premiere, you can separate different parts of the video into different timelines. This helps with lag because if I were to take, like, say, an image on this particular timeline here, which is very used up and very laggy, and I try to move it, there is a considerably annoying delay associated with that. So as a result of that, on my editing, I have to break things up into multiple timelines. This also gives you like a general overview of how complex the project is, like moment to moment. There's a lot of different things. There's a lot of effects like copy pasted on top of each other, and in fact on this timeline in particular I have my demo lines still preserved. Now what exactly is like a demo line? Well, before I like to give you some insight into how exactly I get people's voices and inflections to line up perfectly with how I want them to. So for instance, with this scene here,
Mitch McConnell, please transfer. Why do our politicians
stuff like that. So how do I do it exactly? Do I just send them the lines and I tell them what to do? No, because that can introduce how vague it is, and also I don't necessarily know what I want the lines to be until I edit it, right? I might change the lines according to something I see in editing. So for instance, in this scene here, I decided that I wanted to play with speeding up the footage and making a bang noise to do like a funny effect, and I wouldn't have thought of that until I started editing. So what I do here, and I'm going to now mute the original audio here, is I'm going to show you my demo lines. And in these demo lines, what I do is I voice them myself with my voice in this context to get the inflections right, to get the sort of mood correct. And I do give them advice on how to change their voice so that it's not exactly like mine. So if you get the demo mode, you can see it like this.
Mitch McConnell, please drone strike. Why do our politicians hog all the good missiles?
And there you go. And it works quite well, in my opinion, for getting the scenes that I want. Although voice actors tend to send me a lot of different kinds of lines. They might even differentiate from my demo, but honestly, I encourage them to. The demo only exists to give them like a general overview of what it should be. For those who are new to the channel, I just want to quickly draw your attention to like approximately how much work is involved in making this. I do this every single time, but you can see here that this section of the video here, it lasts from maybe 140 to about 205, so about 25 seconds. And this is the amount of stuff layered on top of each other in just that period of time, you know. I have four different kinds of text over here. A lot of this text has different opacity settings. This has difference. This is soft light. The ones on top often use cropping in order to actually get them to transition like that, and they involve things like color emboss. And this goes for almost everything as the video progresses. There are some scenes that are far less complicated. There are some scenes that are far more complicated. And it comes out to this density. So what I do generally for my videos is I'll try to get 45 seconds of video done every single day. That is over 8 hours of work on average, including like just writing and voicing, which is, in my opinion, the hardest step. It's the most annoying. But I am able to, in that process, get some quite unique looking color schemes. So you can see here with this text, like right here, that it is sort of, it has this looping look to it, and it has all these interesting things. And not even that, it also moves as it goes on. It changes a little bit, but my editing software is kind of laggy, so you don't get to see it very easily. Really quick, I want to go over the intro because the intro is one of the shortest actual like splits in the video. It's also one of the most complicated, involving the most things. You'll also notice that when it comes to making intros like this, I include a lot of sound effects, which is also another layer of stuff that I've had to do. You know, as I make videos, I sort of iterate on what I've previously done. With this intro in particular, it was not possible to edit it in the same way that I do everything else. This area right here. You'll notice that it has good playback. I can play it and see what it looks like immediately. I can go over here, play it, look at it. That's because it's rendered. In Adobe, you can render stuff before it's actually being exported. So you can see what it looks like when it's fully rendered, zoom around very quickly, and not have any problems. The thing is, if you ever change any bits of this, even slightly, it will unrender that, and the result is lag. In there, it's not as bad. But if I were to say, not render at all, so if I delete the render files real quick, and I were to try to play it in the same way, this is what it would look like.
Activated.
It is annoying in some cases when, yeah, like here, you literally can't tell what's happening because the FPS is simply too low. The computer is not actually fast enough to deal with this. So what I had to do was, of course, I had to render it. But not only that, every single major change, I would generally have to render it again. So this single section here, extremely long. You know, it's only maybe 15 seconds. But it took a lot of work and a lot of effort. The rest of the video is a bit like this. It's not as bad. It's also for this reason that I separated out the very, very end sequence, like literally the last 1 minute and 20 seconds of the video, I separated out into its own sequence because I understood that this scene of Monsoon was going to be extremely intensive for the computer, so I needed to isolate it. And in this case in particular, I said earlier that I got a better hold of transparency and visual effects, significantly more than previous videos, honestly, when it came to transparency and interaction with color. Like, for instance, here, I used different transparency settings to get this picture of Monsoon, and I had to use, like, inversions of color, and stuff like that, to get him to be different colors so that you could tell it was him, because if I just remove this real quick, you know, it's still the same, but it doesn't stand out as much as blue does, especially because there's purple here. It's very interesting, having a red Monsoon, then purple, then blue Monsoon. But in these visual settings, I also transitioned him. I had to make sure out of all of these possible visual settings that I chose the right one. Because some of them will arbitrarily make it darker. You know, others might not show it. And it was very hard to get this right. It's a trial and error thing. I also had to do a few transitions that you might notice are specifically unique to this scene, and that I'm going to use more in the future because I learned about how to do them through experimentation. So if we take a look at this... So this sequence right here, where you get Monsoon zooming directly in, this looks natural and pretty normal, actually. It looks pretty nice because you get this zoom. The thing is, though, that this is not actually bigger. Like, let's just isolate this clip by itself. It's only a few frames. This here is as big as the frame gets. It does not get bigger than this, right? As it zooms out, you need to create material, essentially. You need to replicate. If we quickly turn off the motion blur here, like we just get rid of it, you will see what is actually behind the illusion here. I create the illusion of a zooming Monsoon by replicating the scene. So you use an effect called replicate for this, where you create about, 3 layers of copies around the original scene. So this is it totally zoomed out. I can replicate it to any number I want, really, but 3 is approximately good. You don't need it to be more zoomed out than that. And what I do is I include motion blur as a means of disguising this. As well as this, I have stuff like how other clips layer over it to sort of disguise this zooming effect. So you only really see Monsoon in the final product. But yeah, this is actually just a replication with a lot of mirroring effects. And I'm going to display to you real quick, just like this is actually how it works. If you don't have all these very specific mirroring effects at exactly the right settings, it's going to look kind of awkward. So for instance, if I delete this mirror here, you'll notice this hard line, and this goes for anything. If I delete all the mirrors, it looks like this. So what you do here is a lot of very, very small details to try and fix up the image, and then you're able to create the illusion. People ask me like how I learned this stuff, because it's not like common. Like, you don't just figure this out normally. Like, even if you're good, you don't experiment and find that out normally. Now, for me, when it came to these opacity settings, so for instance, overlaying Raiden slaughtering people over gameplay and having it look smooth, that was experimentation. But say for these transitions, I basically just looked it up online, honestly. If you feel like you want to do something and you can't quite put your finger on it and you want to figure out how to do it, I recommend looking it up. How I learned to edit in general was that there was things that I wanted to do. I had the idea in my head, I'd seen them before, so I looked them up. And then later on, when you're done looking those up and you do other things and you've looked up other stuff, you can figure out how to put your own unique twists on it. In my case, I would play a lot with opacity settings. And here you can see, in this sequence here specifically, it's like a music video. I really like it. I will have the next scene begin, so both scenes are overlaid on top of each other. And what I would often do is use the lighten effect on opacity. This allows it to sort of this basically makes it so it only shows bright pixels. And fortunately, the background is dark. So you're able to get this smooth transition effect here, where it goes from one scene to the next, just like that, not even realizing that it's moving. And, you know, really, really stupid and complicated details with a bunch of different keyframes all over the place for everything else. This is more insight into the creative process of how exactly I make my videos. But when I'm deciding to make my video, I will generally, like, if I'm really set on it, I will edit together a scene and I will edit together how it should look and feel. So this is why this is called Part 0. Part 0 was the first part of the video that I made. I made everything around Part 0 next. Then I made 1, and then I made 2, 3, and then I made the intro. But Part 0 was the very, very first thing that I edited. In fact, I edited Part 0 with no sound. I didn't edit with any voice lines. So this here was what made me decide to do this. Was the RGB sword. It was the first thing I edited, and after I did it, and I played with the invert settings, and I tried to create impact and noises.
I spent $3,000.
I decided that I was going to do it. So this scene actually does have the most impressive and interesting color of the entire video, because I thought, like, I was having fun with it originally when I made it. I was in no rush. Whenever Sam hits something, you'll notice I color the effect with an invert effect, and I twitch the colors around the scene in general. Then over here, I do sort of these crazy layerings where the middle's green and then goes to red, purple, and blue. This is also where I got the idea for all of Sam's attacks here to be colored. You'll notice what I do here is I do a very, very complicated series of masking here over the opacity of a layer that's on top to basically track it and increase in size whatever he hits and the decrease in size whatever he's done hitting. Then taking the below layers of that and deciding what to do from there. So in this one, for instance, I made it very, very blue. So he hits and it's blue. And the one below here, red and green. So that's how I do it, basically. I feel like I can't tell you more than just the basic details of that, because you shouldn't seek to replicate it like exactly. On a side note, I do want to show how to do the RGB lighting thing, because it's not like some automatic nice effect. you know, it looks pretty good in retrospect. The RGB lighting sword, it sort of appears acceptable, especially when it's moving slowly like this. What I do for the RGB lighting on the sword is I have this mask, which is an approximate model of the sword, tracking where the sword is and should be. And you just have to do this manually. You have to control the position of each of these points at each of these areas in time manually. So I can do this, and I could sort of make other shit look green if I wanted to, that kind of thing. Over here, we have the color balance. Like, here's where it's actually happening. So if I move this, there we go. The entire scene can become green. And this is just tracking automatically. And what's happening is, this is tracking manually. And what's happening is underneath this, this is basically just a mask applied to the effect. If I were to delete it, the entire scene would be the color of the sword, which you don't want. And underneath that, basically the hue is just rotating. If you don't know like how hue works, there's two kinds of main ways you can do color in like editing, especially like editing the color at a very basic level, and how pixels are represented on your screen. You have RGB and HSL. I was taught it was called HSL, but in Premiere it's called HLS. It doesn't matter. But RGB is just changing the values of red, green, and blue. So this is high red, no green, and no blue. So you get just red and black. But HLS is very useful and different, and I like to use it more. It has these three axes based on degrees. So hue is basically like a little color wheel where you can rotate it infinitely and make it fast or slow and change it like that. So you can change how the whole thing generally feels in terms of color without being really overly precise. And saturation just does this. You know, it makes it more saturated, makes the color brighter and such. One thing I do appreciate about saturated is that it also forces everything to be the highest saturation, which means it causes pixelation. Here we can see the timeline for part 2, and if I were like most proud of any one particular part of my video where I felt like I was really coming out and doing my very, very best, it was part 2 of the video, which is basically the part with Mistral and the dog and stuff like that. The part I am most proud of, most like happy with, is the explosion here. Especially because I was able to introduce a lot of funny sound effects and think of funny jokes for it. You can see here that there's these sort of unique visual effects behind him, which is just a kind of gradient wipe that's expanding. And below that is a very, very embossed sort of thing to give it that pixelated sort of squarish shape that it has. On top of that, there's a bunch of text, which is inverted so that it's the direct opposite of the color behind it. Stuff like that. But then I get to the explosion, where I get to do a lot of fun color. So here we have a yellow, totally yellow and blue explosion, which is morphing in the back, and you can see the sort of morphed bending of the containers here. Transitioning into Light and Flying, but while he's moving, you can see the brighter color parts of him are actually, like, their color has changed, and they're jiggling faster than he's moving. So it gives an impression of very, very fast and frantic motion while also being in slow motion. It's then on top of that, once he actually hits, there's a lot of impact, and not only this, the visuals reflect to change it, and he gets this sort of purple red hue to it. This is something that, you know, I could explain in gross detail. It's basically just using gradient wipe as an effect over the regular image and then having a colored image under it. So if I remove the regular image, this is what the colored image looks like, and there's a regular image on top of that that sort of filters it. But anyways, it's mostly just like how creative you want to be and what colors you use. And I don't think about these colors really. Sometimes they'll use After Effects and stuff like that. I will kind of want the colors to be approximately the same, but when it came to choosing blue and yellow, it's just kind of what you feel like. And every editor is going to have a different like opinion of that, and they're also going to have different tweaks on like how exactly they want to do this. How are they going to make it look? How twitchy is it going to be? Are they going to, are they going to twist around the explosions like this as the explosion expands? How soft are they going to make it? Are they going to make it very soft so it looks like this? Or are they going to make it not soft at all so it looks kind of sharp? Like this. It really depends. And there's a lot of small settings you can tweak. Being an editor like this, who has to do like all these wild things, I don't necessarily have to do them, but it's fun, right? Is just about like streamlining this process. You don't have to be good and deliberate. Like, people get this idea that every time I change settings like this, it's so deliberate, and it is compared to other people, but sometimes I will just look at this and go, the text doesn't, the text looks kind of weak here. Throw on a color emboss and just make it like more embossed and just turn up the color emboss over time. Now it looks like this, and it's actually better because it looks more tweaked. It gives it a corrupted look. I do this a lot of images. I invert colors a lot of the time because of this. Same thing, same principle. I didn't think too much about that. And it's hard to get to the point where you're like not thinking about it all the time. Now that I zoom out, it looks like a lot of work, right? And it is. It's 45 seconds for over 8 hours of work every day. You better hope it is, right? But what I'm most impressed with, I think, this video is my sound editing. My sound editing in this video is fucking superb compared to what I'm normally like, and I think I'm only going to get better at it. I have a sort of small inventory of sounds that I often use whenever I feel like it, and I don't think about it too much because thinking about what sound you're going to use too much wastes time. So very often I'll just use big boom sound effects, meme sound effects, stuff like that. It makes the process easier. But for instance, in part 4, there's a lot of work like dedicated to getting this to work. So like every single time that there is a lightning strike, I insert a lightning strike sound effect. So right here,
Your idea of freedom isn't.
let's just remove that.
Your idea of freedom isn't slavery.
It feels wrong not to have a thunder sound effect there. And it's just trial and error. And right below this is, of course, the rain sound effect, stuff like that. Very basic, but having stuff like having the Anthem of the South play when the banner appears, having all this stuff, changing the music to be more ominous when he's doing this. These are all fairly deliberate steps, honestly, compared to my visual editing. My sound editing has a lot more thinking involved, especially like what sounds are good, and you'll very often have to tweak the sounds to be to your liking. I have a lot of respect for people who make sound libraries and stuff like that, or for movies especially, because they have to be so creative. They have to change a lot of basic sound effects to sound kind of different and interesting, and it's very, very difficult. And real quick, like before I forget, if you'd like to screenshot, if you'd like to get an idea of what the editing timeline really looks like when it's all put together and unified and stuff like that, we're just going to go over what it looks like for every single part. I'll just show you real quick so you can get a grasp about how approximately complicated this project was, which is quite a bit. This is the intro. And next comes this part here. Then comes part 0, which is the first thing I edited. It's very short, and it's not that complicated, except for color. It's very complicated for that. After part 0, we get to part 2, which you've just seen. Quite complicated, this one. Very long. Then we move on to part 3. Part 3, I scope it down a little bit. It's less crazy. It's less long. Because I think that I was getting a little fatigued. Part 4, we step it up significantly because this is the home stretch, basically. It is like the most important chapter towards the ending, especially when it comes to all of the sound editing. For this scene here, you can see there's quite a bit of sound editing. Stuff like having
for
just swishing noises, transitioning effects, that kind of thing. I would say for the scene with Sam, I edited more sound than I did like visually, and I had to pay more attention to sound than that. In fact, when it came to this scene here, this was the most infuriating and difficult scene to write. I go over this in my director's thing, but it took a long time to write it. I was editing as I was writing it, you know. I would write something, throw it in, edit it, see if it's good, and then change things around all the time. Trial and error. All of it's trial and error. And then finally, we got our very, very final part, which is, of course, complicated on a per second basis. But once you get to the very end, it smooths out and becomes the final part. Fun fact, actually, for the video, I was very confused about this, but I fade out the sound here, you know, so that it becomes soft by the end. But that doesn't seem to happen in my video. I don't know what happened, but perhaps I saved it too early, something like that. So that's approximately how much complication and like specific editing is going in. You know, there's all this cutting. It's very, very complicated. Previously, I felt like my videos are very, very neat, but I don't have the time and I cannot expend the effort now to be neat when the videos have this much going on for them. So I hope you like that. I hope it gives you like a better grasp of like what I have to do, what's required, how complicated the project is. I said I aim for 45 seconds being finished every day, but sometimes it's 30. Sometimes it's 35 or 40. You know, sometimes finishing those last 5 seconds is hard, really hard, and you have to quit for the day. But besides that, I was really impressed with the speed that I did this project at. I think that the other project I have to take slower because it's just going to be longer than 19 minutes. I know, that's pretty crazy, but it probably is going to be longer than 19 minutes. I'm getting ready for that. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for subscribing. It really helps, you know, that I do have like some guarantee that what I will, all this effort that I put into it will be seen. And it's really nice now, actually, that now I have somebody to tell about it and ask questions about it. And if you have questions, absolutely tell me. I'll try to go into detail with whatever you got to ask me.